Hey, what's up guys? My name is Jin and today we're going to go over CSCS Chapter 20, and this chapter is in program design and technique for aerobic endurance training. So let's dive right in. So the first page here is on factors related to training. We're looking at max aerobic capacity and look at VO2 max here. VO2 max measures how well how much oxygen you're able to utilize during aerobic endurance exercises. And so looking at VO2 max, maximum volume of oxygen utilized during aerobic exercise. And this is a typo here, I apologize. It's HIIT, which stands for high intensity interval training. And this helps with peak power output, hydrogen ion buffering, and utilization of fat as a fuel source. And so take a look at lactate threshold here. It is the point where the lactic acid builds up in the blood higher than the resting value of the lactic acid. And so the key is to sustain aerobic energy production at the highest percentage of VO2 max without accumulating large amounts of lactic acid in the muscle and blood. So the lower your lactic threshold, the better it is, because we don't want the lactic acids to build up fast. Maximal lactate steady state is the exercise intensity at which max lactate production equals max lactate clearance within the body. So that's roughly about 85% of the VO2 max. And again, when you're getting rid of the lactate just as much as the body is producing it at its max, that's called the maximal lactate steady state, and that is about 85% of your VO2 max. Exercise economy is the cost of activity at given exercise velocity. So how efficient you're able to, again, utilize oxygen, like we talked about with VO2 max, and how well you're able to get rid of the lactic acid accumulating in your body. Looking at running, it's better to have, generally speaking, it's better to have shorter stride length, right? And greater stride frequency as opposed to overstriding. And then with cycling, body mass size, cycling velocity, and aerodynamic positioning, things like this can affect the outcome. Going over the next page here, designing an aerobic endurance program. All these markers and categories are the same for every chapter. Later in the book, about anaerobic exercises, aerobic exercises. So there's a bit of an overlap, but let's look at how these apply to designing an aerobic endurance program specifically. So exercise mode specificity is very important. You want to design a program that is tailored to the goal of your client or your patient. So being specific with whether you're prescribing walking, running, or cycling, right? And then there's training frequency, how often you're training, how long you're training for. Training intensity, it can benefit skeletal muscle adaptations. So increased intensity could result in increased recruitment of type 2 fibers if you're utilizing those more than type 1 fibers. Heart rate, RPE scale, and metabolic equivalents are good ways to measure training intensity and track it, right? And then there's exercise duration, how long you're exercising for, and then exercise progression. Are we progressing or regressing based on what parameter? Is it their RPE scale, their heart rate, their symptom provocation? So that's gonna be all very important there. All right, moving on to the next slide, types of aerobic endurance training programs. There's long distance training, which has the athlete train at about 70% of the VO2 max. And training distance, generally speaking, should be greater than the race distance. Improved mitochondrial energy production is something that you can expect from long distance training, and oxidative capacity, better or improved oxidative capacity of the skeletal muscle is also something that you can expect. Another thing you can expect is increased utilization of fat as fuel, so turning type 2X fibers, which are more fast twitch fibers, into type 1 fibers, more of a slow twitch fibers, is to be expected. Pace, tempo training, you're working slightly higher, you're working at a slightly higher intensity than when you would be when you were in a race, right? So stress the athlete at specific intensity for the pace or tempo training. So setting a certain pace for a warm-up versus the real exercise is an example of pace or tempo training, and it improves energy production there. Interval training is another way to train for aerobic endurance. So exercises at intensities close to VO2 max, so you're basically at the max capacity, and so the work interval is going to be shorter. This is just an example of what an interval training would look like. So working for 3 to 5 minutes and then taking a break for 3 to 5 minutes. So it's a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. That's just one example of what an interval training might look like. And increased VO2 max and enhanced anaerobic metabolism could be expected here. Fartlek training is just another type of training here. Combination of easy running, where you're running at about 70% of the VO2 max, and then adding a hill work or short, fast bursts of running at about 85 to 90% of the VO2 max is fartlek training. Application of program design. So looking at off-season, pre-season, in-season, and post-season, right? Off-season, the goal is to really develop the base and a good foundation for cardio fitness. So here, long duration, low intensity workouts can benefit you because you're trying to, like I said, build a good foundation, increase the general cardio capacity. And you shouldn't increase training duration too much here, not more than 5 to 10% per week, okay? In preseason, focus on increasing the intensity now, right, as we're getting closer to the beginning of the season, and maintain or reduce duration and incorporate all types of training into the program. So we'll talk about it later, but in preseason cross training, where you're adding some resistance training into aerobic training, can be beneficial for the athlete for many different reasons, such as injury prevention and strengthening the muscles that you need to perform better during in-season. Now, in season, it's low intensity and short duration, so things are a little more specific here. You're making sure that you're being efficient with the programs and exercises during in-season, and then post-season, we all need rest, so active rest is recommended. All right, special issues related to aerobic endurance training. We talked about this earlier, cross-training, right? It's the mode of training that can be used to maintain general conditioning in athletes during reduced training due to injury or recovery. So if they're in rehab, because I am a physical therapist, for example, I see some runners at my clinic and they have to reduce the amount of training or running that they do, and this is a great time to build some muscles and build some strength and stability, right? So cross training can come in handy. It also reduces likelihood of overuse injuries in the future. We're learning to grow and turn on muscles that hasn't been turned on, and basically not letting the athlete overuse one type of muscle all the time. Detraining is reduced training duration or intensity. And this obviously can lead to training adaptations, not in the most positive way, right? Because we're reducing that training duration or intensity, use it or lose it. And then tapering is detraining on purpose, right? Systemic reduction of training duration and intensity. And then there's also technical work and nutritional intervention when it's tapering period. And so there's different types of tapering. You guys can take a look at that. Linear tapering, gradual decrease in overall daily training volume, and then steep or step tapering is abrupt reduction of the training volume. So that is it for today. It was a shorter chapter. Make sure that you guys take a look at the study guide. If you have any questions, feel free to comment in the comment section down below. And I'll see you guys for chapter 21. Thanks.